and miracles and all this sort of stuff just to get the idiot's attention. Okay, but it's all human psychology. Now, when they talk about bliss in the Garden of Eden, it was bliss because their minds were empty. They never had busy egos. But when they had knowledge, that's when, of course, they had the knowledge of right and wrongs and opposites and everything. So, of course, they entered into hell. That's the whole thing about Satan and hell. It's a busy egoic mind. There's nothing to do with nasty demons or anything like that. And when you look into the Garden of Eden, Genesis, well, what was the snake? He was just like a guy that just suggested, by the way, Eve, if you eat from that tree, then you will be knowledgeable like them. Because it said in the Bible, we don't want them to become knowledgeable like us, Elohim, the powerful ones, not just one God. You see, in the Bible, what they do to worm out of that, they then make out that God is the triune. You know, it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that's why they say, we don't want Adam and Eve to become like us. Well, no, because that would make you a schizophrenic God. Because why would you speak about yourself in the plural? Only if you're a schizophrenic. I mean, we don't speak about ourselves in the plural, knowing that we've got a spirit, do we? And knowing that we've got two sides of the brain with different opinions. We don't say, oh, hang on, I've got to consult us before I get back to you on that. We don't say that because people will think we're fucking schizophrenic. So apply the exact same stuff. It would mean that God is either a schizophrenic or there are many gods. And if you look into ancient Anunnaki stories, Nephilim and everything, you know, that the whole thing from all over the world, there were gods and they came from the stars, this, that, and the other. So it was the gods that, didn't want Adam and Eve to be more knowledgeable. Now, this goes back to Enki and Enlil, because Enki and Enlil, the Anunnaki, one of them was benevolent towards the human being, and the other one, wanted to keep us suppressed. And so those stories from the Bible took from that stuff. It's as clear as day when anybody looks into it. These Christians, these completely hypnotized and indoctrinated fools that believe those stupid stories, they're just ridiculous. If they just brought their mind, if they opened up their minds and their hearts, then they will see that, people have been speaking about all those different sorts of stories for thousands of years before they were wrote in the Bible, because it's ancient mythology, it's ancient humanisms. Why is it all the same? Because it derives from the human brain. The split human brain, heaven and hell, right and left, hot and cold, opposites, like the universe. Oh my God, it's as clear as day.
Right.
We don't need devils. We don't need Jesus. We don't need gods. The universe is God.
Yeah.
So that's my point on Adam and Eve.
So, is being dumb bad and evil?
I think being dumb is a blessing. Ignorance is bliss. The more people are dumb, you see, there's parameters to the benefits of being dumb. If you are dumb and you live in a benevolent society where you don't get taken advantage over, then being dumb's great because you don't carry the weight of everything. You're living in bliss. But being dumb in a modern society, you get abused. You get locked into, you get farmed, and you get exploited. And that's what's happened on the world. We're all born into a prison planet. We're all slaves.
Yeah.
Well,
so the reason I ask that is because, like, for example, to put it into contrast, I always say that the stronger the villain, the stronger the hero, the stronger the hero, the stronger the villain. If everybody was very smart, let's say somebody like you, who's apparently very intelligent, you wouldn't look as intelligent if everybody was not as dumb.
Exactly.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It would actually force you to have to be smarter. It would have to force you to actually expand. So, with that being said, why do you think evil exists on the planet?
Well, I don't think evil per se does exist. It's just that there has to be a polar opposite to everything and anything for anything to exist.
Well, evil has to exist. If good is going to exist, evil has to exist.
Absolutely, it does. Because if evil didn't exist, there could be no notion of good.
Right. So let me ask you this. Here's a better question. Are you in the position to Uh, let's say, are you for abolishing evil on the planet, or do you think it should just exist?
I don't think there's ever going to be a realm where we can get outside of that which we are, that which the cosmos is. The cosmos is a paradox. The cosmos has polarities. Absolutely everything. How do we suppose, in our silly little infinite wisdom, that we are going to change the nature of the universe?
Mm-hmm.
We're never going to do that. What
Mm-hmm.
we have to do is we have to learn to accept the creatures that we are
Mm-hmm.
and to look at. Look, I wrote a portion in my book, and I'm saying, look, there is no wrong per se, because if you imagine all of the things that so-called people and courts have deemed to be wrong throughout the millennia, then you can see that people that came after that advent have benefited. Now, when there was murderers like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, all these sorts of things, they brought a greater awareness to the general public about people that can be very, very pleasant, very intelligent, good looking, and, very clever and beguiling, but they'll be murderous motherfuckers. So do be careful. And so, of course, now we're very careful because we bear all this stuff in mind, albeit lots of it is unconscious. Now, all the prisons that have ever been on the planet, they have housed people that have been deemed to be destructive to society. But since the advent of whatever they did, there's been new rules, laws, and regulations brought into power which have protected and kept millions of people safe on the premise of one person. An instance is the shoe bomber. The shoe bomber killed 280 people thereabouts. And since then, massive changes were brought about security for international travel, which have saved potentially billions of lives because other people can't fucking do it anymore. So was it wrong? Was it evil? No. Because look at how it's benefited humanity in the long run. You see, what people don't get over, the biggest deficit with a human being is Ziggy, is that we were always thinking from our ego about how it's affected us and what I think, and I don't like this and this, that, and the other. Get outside
That's
the
right.
fucking silly ego and look at humanity en masse. Every single thing that happens that we could consider to be abhorrent, we have a propensity to try to eradicate that happening again. That is a good thing. That's progress.
Yeah, you know
And
what?
so
Okay. I didn't. I thought you
where's
were
the
done,
wrong?
Dad.
Where's the evil?
You know where I look at how, let's say, Ted Bundy or even like guys like Charles Manson, all those heinous, like, let's say what we were categorized as evil acts. Those things happening appear to have been like, oh, something like that happening in society was a terrible thing, but in actuality it was a very good thing. And not because of the actual bad thing that happened, but it only gives the opportunity for the opposite side to expand as well. But we could go one or two ways. We could sit there and judge that character, like, Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, on how evil they are, or we could just be aware of the fact of what they did and how that brought about the expansion for the opportunity for good now to exist, whatever ideas of good and bad may be for that individual. You understand? That's why I always, again, if we're gonna look at it from the perspective of sitting there, you know, oh, that pointing the finger, you're projecting, you're creating that person in that reality as that individual. So let's say if I sit here and I start to criticize or talk about Charles Manson, and I say, man, that guy is evil, that guy is this, that guy is that, I'm literally creating that reality for that individual in my worldview, and more of those characters to actually expand and persist. If in actuality I see that awareness of that happening, but yet I can put now the same direction I would have put all that energy toward judging him, toward now the opposite side of the potential for good. I now just literally transmuted energy that could have potentially went a detrimental way into now a favorable way for me and the collective of society. This is why I feel like in order for you to change the world, you literally got to change yourself, because that's why I've always said you see the world for how you are. You never see it for how it is. But the things that trigger you, if you sit there and you sit yourself in a polarized stance to try to fight that, you're becoming an adversary, but you are now taking the position of a human, of humanity. When in actuality, you're supposed to be more in the center and not in the. That's why they say you're in the world but not of it. You sit in the center. You're observing the stuff happening, and then you see where you're going to put your attention and direct all that energy to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so if you imagine that all the people that were murdered and died as a result of war uh, over the last like 2,000 years, can you imagine if they didn't die and if they lived out their lives to the ripe old age? Can you imagine what the world population would be now? We are terrified of the population rising much more than it is now, 8.5 million. We're petrified because in 2 years' time, it's going to be 11 million. It's going off the record.
Yeah.
And so we're wondering how the fuck we're going to deal with this. And you see, this is why many of the measures that are coming in to place, and people, I speak about this, with Paul, on lots of occasions, and I've been speaking about it for many years. When people like Alex Jones and David Icke and Russell Brand and anyone that's got something to say about the cabal, about Davos, and about these trillionaires ruling us and doing this and doing that, and they just want to surveil us and they just want to control us. Well, I'm telling you now, if they wasn't doing that, then the world very easily would be absolute chaos. And just all you got to do is, you see, what they do is they do things like this COVID thing. I think that was a fabricated thing because they needed to test the water to see what level of control they had globally, because it's their intention to be able to shut down the whole world with anything like that. That's for the benefit of mankind if something like that does come about. But of course, there's pros and cons for everything. It means restrictive travel. It means we're watched everywhere we go. It means everything we buy and sell, because we've got the mark of the beast on our forehead, is registered. Well, look, every single thing needs to be registered, what we're buying and selling, because they've got to keep a very, very close eye on resources. Because I'm telling you now, if there's, say, like a coronal mass ejection whereby computers go down and we can't communicate anymore, and all of a sudden all the shipping lanes all over the world are, they're all in a mess. There's going to be starvation, civil war, and rioting in every single town across the world within 2 weeks. This is why it's absolutely imperative that they know exactly what's going on, especially as the population increases more and more and more. Do you have a problem with that? I mean, look, there's pros and cons, and there's things that we don't like about being monitored and about, being overly governed and, all this sort of thing. But I don't consider there's any way to deal with a world with a population which is rising.
When you're ready, can we go into the conscious, unconscious, subconscious, and like that topic whenever you want to?
I'm ready.
It'll tie in. Um, so remember when we talked about if you get knocked out, the memory is something that we observe is not there, right? The memory of what happened, who we are. Like I got, I went knocked out once, and the first thing I was like, what the fuck happened, But that whole so we got conscious, we got subconscious, and then we got unconscious. When you talked about the voices in your head that you were talking to, like let's say that you had this experience with Jesus and whatnot, were you in an unconscious state?
No.
You were in a conscious state. So
I was completely conscious.
So do you think that consciousness is an aspect of the human body, or is that something that you are when you're in a metaphysical experience as well?
I think consciousness is fundamental. The cosmos is conscious, and everything is being dreamt within consciousness. And many people are speaking about this philosophy these days. There's people like Bernardo Kastrup. He's a very renowned philosopher of this moment in time. There's other people like Donald Hoffman, who are writing their own ideas of what this world is. There's people like Carlson, what was his name? The black dude, Carlson,
Billy
Dyer.
Carson.
Billy Carson, yeah, Billy Carson. All these sort of people. What they're hypothesizing is that this thing is a sort of simulacrum. It's a sort of hologram. It's a sort of simulation because it is, in actual fact, a projection from consciousness. There is no doubt about that at all. Philosophers have been saying this for 2,000 years. The world is a projection of our consciousness. Even our quantum physicists have been saying this for over 100 years since they discovered the paranormal supernatural double slit experiment. What goes on there? Why is it that consciousness seems to create? Because it does. Because fundamentally, with the quantum field, it's conscious, but then it needs an intention to create. As soon as the intention comes about, then all systems are go. And so, can you imagine? Look, if there's an island and there is 100 people put on the islands who are like catatonic. They're just cabbages. Well, nothing's going to manifest, isn't it? Absolutely nothing is going to manifest. But if one of those all of a sudden has his consciousness turns on, then he's going to start to do things. He's going to start to be constructive. And so that's how it works. And the other 99 of these catatonics wouldn't be aware of anything. Except the one person, he becomes aware. Well, that's what consciousness is. And we've become aware, and via our awareness, we think things into existence.
So how would you describe self-awareness or self-actualization? And is that something that we develop? And if so, how would you develop that?
Well, to develop
And what does memory have to do with all that too?
Well, memory enables.
And why do we lose memory in the unconscious state?
Why do we
all that in together? Yeah.
Why do we lose memory?
In the unconscious state, like when you get knocked out.
Well, because we don't need it. Because when we're unconscious, we go back to source. When we're in source, we don't need memory.
So then that's what I'm saying. Do you need memory to be in a conscious state? Does consciousness need memory?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you never had memory, then you'd be doing the same things over and over again.
So so what's the difference between consciousness and awareness?
Consciousness en masse is it's what gives rise to our cognizance. It brings about a certain level of awareness, but we can increase that level. I think basically, to be fair, it's semantics. When we're speaking philosophically or when we're speaking spiritually, we use consciousness in some ways, and then we use awareness in other ways. And for instance, Eckhart Tolle will be speaking about, having a feeling of awareness, which was vastly surpassing what he used to have. What happened there? Our awareness increased while our consciousness simultaneously increased, because it's consciousness which allows the awareness. So I think it's just semantics, to be fair. Again.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this. Do you think that your environment is aware of you as much as you are aware of your environment?
The whole thing is awareness. Right. The whole thing is conscious.
So it's aware of you just like you're aware of your environment. So I'm in my space right now. Do you think that everything I'm observing is as aware of me as I am aware of the environment?
Well, if you picture yourself having a dream and your homunculus is having an experience within your dream, then if you are speaking to somebody within that dream and you're saying, do you think that if you go to sleep now, you'll lose your awareness? Well, look at what's going on. You've got two figures in the mind or in consciousness. The consciousness is what's created them. They're not separate. They think they're separate, And that's exactly what's happening to us now, because when we wake up, all of a sudden the homunculus apparently dies. It's not got any reality when this extended state of awareness comes about. So, the question that you're asking, you don't need to ask any more of these questions forever once you get inside your mind nice and clear that we are in conscious awareness and we are not what we think we are. We are only shards of consciousness. Well,
So,
you see, like, if you
well,
look
there.
at the beach, then one grain of sand, if you've got two grains of sand, considering that, they're individual, and they could be saying to each other, one could say to the other one, hey, how you doing? And the other one go, yeah, cool. So what do you do? Oh, I'm just the beach. You're the beach. Oh, well, that's cool. What do you do? I'm a grain of sand. Well, they're both the same thing. The only difference is it's semantics, isn't it? One of them is including himself to be the whole group of these grains of sand. The other one is looking at it from his perspective of being one grain of sand.
Right, but wouldn't that be where that one grain of sand gave consciousness to the other grain of sand, and in kind that other grain of sand gave consciousness to the other grain of sand?
Now, they've all got consciousness because they're all the beach.
But they have to give each other consciousness for them to actually be conscious. So I'll give you
No,
an
because
example.
they're all.
You ever watched the movie Inception? You noticed how they're walking about in a dream, but the moment they become aware, the people start looking at them. So, like for example, I had a lucid dream at one point, and I remember I'm in a dream, but the moment I became aware I'm in a dream, I started to feel like everything now started to look at me. But that's me. The fact that I became aware, everything else became aware as well.
Projecting.
Right. So
Projecting.
now everything became aware, and it could be a scary experience because it kind of felt like I was looking at, like they were looking at me, but I realized I was looking at myself through the
Yeah.
others that I gave consciousness to begin with. The reason I mentioned this about memory and whatnot, when I go, let's say, boom, you get knocked out, you have no memory. This is something as far as like development of awareness. Like it's basically, you ever seen the movie The Avengers? There's a very famous scene where that bald chick, she gave a hard hit to the Hulk and he came out of the body, but then he was aware that he was outside the body. That's a form of being knocked out, but still having that awareness. You get what I'm saying? But in
Well,
this
that's an out
scene,
of body experience, isn't it?
it's an out of body experience, but it should be any time that you go unconscious, it should be an out of body experience. But what causes you to go into that dormant state without having that awareness of memory? You get what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say? Because
Yeah. Yeah. That's.
we eat, we look, we engage in certain things, we eat certain foods, we listen to certain things, we're doing certain things chemically that's putting us in an anesthetic state to begin with. But I feel also is the lack of practice, and not to religify it, but the lack of practice toward putting things more into practice toward like having a relationship with self. Yourself actually starts to grow. That relationship starts to grow. If I was to get knocked out, I would still have an awareness of the fact. It's like this. If I'm in an operating table and they're operating on my car, right? Let's say if I go take my car to the mechanic shop, I'm not gonna sit in the car. I gotta get out of the car, let the mechanic work. I'm aware that they're working on my car. It's the same way. Like if you're in an operating table, you should be able to come out of that state because there's some people who've actually had that experience where they were able to do it. But if you could do it at will at all times, it's because I feel like you've developed a certain level of awareness of self. Like you've developed a avatar, you developed your spirituality, if you want to call it that, for conversation purposes. But this is something you develop. You become, more spiritual. That's what my definition of spiritual is. When I see the unconscious and then I see the word superconscious. It's the same way I can see the word spirit and soul. My spirit is my environment, my reality that's just as aware of me as I am of it. The moment I become self-actualized in the sense that I'm the one that created the whole environment, that environment now becomes aware of me, and it's at my will, where that's what people say, we're co-creators of the universe. You get what I'm saying? But this is where you're going to start to attract more people of like minds. This is why you start to attract more different, because you're basically becoming a beacon of a certain frequency of light.
Hmm.
But when you become too religious, I'm gonna let you go in there. I don't like to get too long-winded, but when you become too religious towards certain things, you tend to fall into the same religious loop that humanity is in. You know what I'm saying? You'll start to manifest certain things probably in your life, like other religious figures or other spiritual people who have the same practices as you, but in a religified way. And I've observed this, where in actuality, I see them and I'm like, I don't say that they're wrong because they're right in their position they're in, but only because I'm grateful for the fact that they see it that way. It allows me to see where I'm being religified, and it gives me the expansion now to, instead of going and debate with them, literally soak in what they're saying like a Christian person and say, wow, this is where I can actually direct my attention to, because if they're directing their attention in that way, and it's not to say that it's always a direct mirror, or to look at it as like, gaslighting yourself or anything like that. It's just literally, instead of becoming reactive, like, you just sit back and reflect. You take your time. You get what I'm saying? And just before you react, start to picture why certain things are happening in your scenario. Like, it's like you're in your dream, and you're really literally creating everything as you go along. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Well,
That's why I wanted to talk about that. And then the super conscious, and then I'll let you get in there, is basically what I'm talking about. When your environment just became aware of you, but you realize that you became all things in that instant. The super conscious. So the spirit, the soul, unconscious, subconscious, but it's all the same shit. You know what I'm saying? The same way you're subconsciously programmed to do certain things, and you're consciously going about your day, everything's happening at once. It's not separately happening. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
well, let me see if we can unravel some of
Yeah, yeah,
this.
good. That's why I wanted to get into that, because I found that very interesting.
Because what part? What part makes
Yeah,
sense?
and I'm gonna. You know why I want to talk about that? Because there was a point where you said that the voice in your head started talking. I've had that experience, but here's the thing, though. I realized I was unconscious, and you know why? Because the moment that I started to put thought into what I just heard, literally within a second later, I forgot what the hell I just heard. It's the most trippiest thing. And it's like when you wake up from a dream and you're trying to remember your dream, and you can kind of get it when it comes to you. But in that moment where you're observed and aware that you're unconscious, and you try to put thought into what it is you heard, in that second that you just heard it, what the fuck did I just hear right now? And that's where I realized that I was unconscious, but I was still aware. You know what I'm saying? That's why I asked you, what's the
Yes.
difference between consciousness and awareness?
Well, first of all, it's a very good point that you make about when you become knocked out. Why is it that we don't leave the body? Um, because if we have certain psychedelic experiences, meditative experiences, out of body experiences, near death experiences. I mean, many people speak about being out of body with a near death experience. So, why don't we have that just simply when we are unconscious, when we're knocked out? Lots of people believe we do. Lots of people believe that we astral travel as soon as we become unconscious. As soon as the body is nice and comfortable in bed, then the conscious facet of us goes into other dimensions. And I think, in my book, I wrote about a certain dream scenario whereby I'm speaking about since my old man died. Uh, on occasions, I've had what seemed to be the ability for me to go and visit him in his world. Now, he doesn't know he's dead, but in that world, he never will die. Um, and when I enter his world, it's like I live in that world as well. And we just act normally. He doesn't say, "Oh, where you been? It's been ages since I've seen you." No, because we've had a relationship and it's an ongoing relationship. So when I go into the dream world where I see my old man, it's like I enter into the body of my avatar in that world. And I
Yep.
believe there's a whole multitude of these parallel dimensions which are going on all the time. Now, the other night, I had all different sorts of crazy, stupid dreams where illogical things were happening. And when I woke up, I thought, why do we have silly dreams like that? For instance, I was in a factory and it was a buffet cafe and it was raining inside the building and everybody was carrying on as normal. And I'm like, it's raining inside the building. And I'm like, this is a stupid dimension. But then I thought, well, why is it stupid? In my dimension, it rains outside the building, but because we're used to that, we don't think anything about it. But I went to a dimension where it rained inside the building and all different sorts of things like that. And so I'm convinced that all these places exist. That's why many of them seem so real. They don't have to be logical. They act in all different sorts of ways because the rules and laws are different in these dimensions. Now, when we are unconscious, Why is it that we instantly aren't standing over our bodies, thinking, "Shit, I'm unconscious. Oh,
Yeah.
look, my body's on the floor. I hope it's going to be okay." And you know, what can I do about it? What can I do about it? When am I going to get back in? Is he dead? I'm pretty sure that if he was dead, then you'd be saying that. You'd be looking at your body and be go, "Fuck, I'm dead," or am I just unconscious? You wouldn't know initially, would you? Until the body never woke up. Then all of a sudden you'd find yourself in purgatory for 49 days, wandering around until you get allocated into heaven or hell or whatever dimension you're going to. But that's a curious thing as to why all of us don't instantly have an out of body experience when we become unconscious. Because we go into the dream realm, but we don't go instantly into the dream world. It takes time. We have to settle in for about an hour before we get REM. And then we'll have REM for about 15 minutes. And then we'll dream. And then we'll have another hour before we have another 15 minutes of REM. This is apparently how it works, isn't it? And so why do we need, this certain allocation of REM before we become conscious in our dream? Because all the other time we're not there. The homunculus hasn't become active. It's just sitting in the waiting room. Think, 45 minutes, another 15 minutes, and I can go out and do something. That's what it's like, isn't it? Because if we just, as soon as we fell asleep, if our avatar became active, then, that would be much more reasonable
Yeah.
than having to wait for our consciousness to seep a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper until we've got rapid eye movement. Then all of a sudden, the homunculus comes online.
Yeah.
Lots of things don't make sense, but I do believe there are powers that you can train, Ziggy. And when we listen to gurus who have been meditating 30 years of their lives, and of course they've been fasting and been vegan all their lives, isn't you? They've got much greater power of consciousness, and they've said in many literature and books and stuff that certain gurus can manifest in two places at the same time. Now, I think that what they are actually doing is they're manifesting in as an apparition, as an ethereal body, because people like Rudolf Steiner, who was writing at the turn of the century, like
I can hear you.
1900, he was, speaking about the etheric body, the astral body, the pain body, the material body, the emotional body. And so many people have considered that there are multiple bodies. And so if you can detach your consciousness via your directed and channeled thoughts, just like you do when you astral project. You see, when I was learning to have astral projections, I concentrated for 150 hours, running through scenarios night after night after night, where my apparition, my consciousness, my astral body would leave my physical body. So I know that that's possible. And I think more gifted people can do it in an instant. And there's been lots of people speaking about, you can read all this stuff in astral projection books, whereby they will say, "You came to me, the other night," or they'll say, "I'm going to come and see you, tonight at a certain time. So put your alarm on, and I'll set my alarm, and I'll come, and then you'll see that this is true." And so there's all this different sort of stuff going on, and it all narrows down to how conscious we are, how broad with our powers. And I think the knowing, we have to have a confidence in knowing in our ability. Now, as soon as I had an out of body experience, I knew that I could do it. And so the rest of them came pretty, sequentially. Whereas the first one, it took me 150 hours because I had to train my mind into doing something that it never done before. But because I was so desirous to do it, my consciousness created my reality.
Yeah.
Now, that is a big deal. And we have to be very, very mindful that we don't dismiss that in a hurry. If you wanted a Lamborghini, for instance, if you set your heart to it, there's a high probability that in 5 years or something, if that's all you really wanted, you could get one. It may be an old one. It may not even be that expensive. It may be a write-off, but you've got a Lamborghini,
Got a
and then
Lamborghini.
you can work on it. You know what I'm saying, Ziggy?
Yep. And so this is the reason I asked you before, to kind of tie into what you were saying about, self-awareness and whatnot, is building a relationship with self. Like, you see how you build a relationship with like people outside of you. You got to put time into that. Like, if I get a
Yeah,
girlfriend, obviously I got to hang out with her. I got to fight with her. I got to love her. I got to get, all the ups and downs. You build a strong relationship like that, right? It's the same way with yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, how much time do you spend with yourself? And this is what I've noticed. There's been times I just left everything out of my room and just put myself in my room, and I wanted to see how I felt in that moment. Did I feel comfortable? Did I feel anxious to want to go to my phone? How comfortable was I in the environment with myself? And that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
as if I was sitting with another person. Because you could be in a room with somebody that you really like, and it doesn't matter. You could just sit there and like harmonize with them just because you really like them, or you could just, even have good chemistry, yet you don't like them that much, so you don't want to be in the same room with them. It's the same thing that I did as far as like trying to develop that wanting to be alone with myself time. And right now, I can actually be with myself uh, for a long period of time and be content with it. But then I got to the point where I also started to observe that I needed to hear a podcast, hear something in my solitude. But now it got to the point where I started to now separate that. Even though I was alone, I was still needing the vices. You know what I'm saying? And then it got to the point where I had to leave those vices out and really see how I would sit with myself. You would start to get to the root little core of like all the little things. It's funny how you mentioned like, the dream that somebody would come to their dream, or I would come to your dream and whatnot. And then people say, oh, when you pray, how does Jesus answer everybody's prayer at one time? But it's the same way where just depending on where your attention and focus are, you are in multiple places at once. Like when you talked about the yogi or the monk being in two different places at one time, it's like it would be more than two places. You could be in like the totality of things. It's just depending on where you're putting your attention and focus determines what you're aware of at that moment,
yeah.
right? But you are in multiple
Well,
places at one time anyway.
remote viewing is a classic
Yeah,
example of this.
yeah.
And so, when we read spiritual literature, we always come upon this 40 days and 40 nights of fasting in the desert. Now, I don't consider it remotely feasible to be fasting in a desert because you need 40 days and 40 nights worth of water, for instance. And the whole concept of a desert is a place without water. So the desert is in the empty mind of solitude.
Mhm.
Now, Plato did this, Jesus did this, and many other people have done it. They haven't gone into the desert. They've just retreated into their own solitude, into the comfort of their own environments. They may have, gone into some sort of remote region so nobody's knocking on the door to break them out of it, because it is a real enormous task if you can spend 40 days and 40 nights alone with yourself
Yeah.
without wanting to kill yourself,
Mhm.
without tearing your face and your eyes out. So here's the thing. I mean, that some people can do it, and I considered at one stage that I would have the constitution to do that. But I think it's vastly more difficult now, Ziggy, is because there's so many things that have been pulling on us. And in Jesus's day, when they were just wandering around the desert and they maybe have one meal every other day, I'm pretty sure that they weren't eating all the time, and so they were spending all this time in solitude, and it was very, very easy for them to have an extension of that. I decided that when I was going to go to these Spanish islands of Tenerife, I was going to do a month in the mountains. And as long as I could find water, then that's what I was going to do. I was just going to fast and I was just going to drink the water. But as it happened, is there was no water in any of these mountains that I went to. And so I couldn't do that. But what I discovered, even if there was water there, that it would be immensely difficult because my body, after 2 days, was crying out for salt, for sugar, and for mental stimulation. because we're addicted to all of those things.
Mhm.
And so, it got to a point whereby, I was just longing for a cup of cappuccino and the froth on top and the chocolate and the brown granulated sugar. And you taste that and you crunch the sweetness, everything. I was like a coffee pervert, imagining every last tasty, delicious, facet of it. And then with the salt on some French fries with an omelette, all these things that we've become so used to, we're addicted to them. There's no doubt about that. And so for any of us to enter into 40 days and 40 nights of solitude fasting, forget it.
Mhm.
Unless you've had, unless you've been a nun or a monk for 10 years prior and you've, done a lot of that in any case. But there's no way on this earth where we're going to do that because we don't have the Constitution anymore. And so you see how our minds have changed. Now, in Jesus' time, focusing would have been vastly more easy to achieve than it is today. And in our lifetime, Ziggy, just going back 20 years, we can see how society has absolutely just fallen, to the wayside because nobody, it seems, has got the attention to listen to a conversation such as ours. And if they do, then they don't have the wherewithal to be able to pass any
Right.
opinions on what we say. I read a few comments on, your channel on videos, and because my channel is no longer there and I block trolls in any case,
Mhm.
well, you've got a handful of trolls who
Yeah.
have been upset by me demeaning them, and now they're feeling a bit free to troll me on your channel. And it's kind of like, you're not even trolling me, you idiot.
So,
And the
man.
thing is about it, they're so hungry for my videos that they're going to your channel to
Yeah.
fucking watch me
And no,
and hate on me.
yeah, and they asked, well, like, what happened to Aaron's channel? I'm like, bro, you don't have his email? Go email him,
Yeah,
bro. Like, what the fuck? Go
all
email him.
fucking up withdrawal symptoms, man.
It's unreal, man. But I mean, look, that just goes to show that you're actually more important than you think, bro. Be honest
Yes,
with you.
without a doubt, but I've always maintained, if anybody watches, say, like more than 5 of my videos, then they're an addict. There's no
Yeah,
doubt about it. It is because there's something about me which is mesmerizing.
yeah.
I'm just one of these watchable sort of people, and
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what I do, what I make videos about, I'm watchable, and
Well,
that's the
you
thing.
know what I noticed. You do kind of ruffle feathers, but you also tickle people's pickle to some extent.
Yeah,
But the reason, I mean, one video that did kind of got me intrigued was when you said, "What is a man?" That's why I actually want to ask you, "What is a man?" Because me
right.
being in this realm, I'm another man, and sometimes you want to say, "Okay, let's talk about that. What is a man?"
Yeah,
But that one video got me. I'm like, you know what? I really want to know what Aaron's definition of what is a man is. Because there's not many people who can actually say what is a man and actually back it up without it actually being an egoic type of answer, to that
yeah.
fucking question. You know what I'm saying? But before I do jump on there, do you believe in history?
Do I believe in anything? No, I don't believe.
Mhm.
I mean, believe is a terminology that we have to use
Well, yeah, for conversation purposes, yeah.
in this fictitious construct. But I've often said in videos, I said, look, I've been to a continent which is called Australia. But if you ask me, do I believe Australia exists? I'll go, well, what do you mean? Does it exist? Well, is there a place called Australia?
Well, yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, if
Yeah,
you
that's
look on the
different. Like you're
maps,
there, it's in a map. You could go visit it now. But I'm talking
yeah,
about just the whole scenario around history. And I don't because I don't want you to go too deep into that because that's not the question I wanted to ask.
okay,
Let me rephrase it. Not to say that Africa is it because I could go visit Africa right now, but more of like let's say the scenarios and situations that happened in history. Like let's say with Adolf Hitler, the exact same story of how he once existed, or if he ever even existed, let's say, just the whole story behind it, the story, because we're all attached to stories. We're not really attached to the actual material. We're attached to the story behind the individual, the idea, or the material. So, like the whole story, do you believe in all those stories that you hear in the past that we call history?
I most certainly do not believe anything that
Hmm.
has been written, because in my lifetime, trying to find truth about things that have happened in my own household with people that I grew up with for years or people that I've known for a long time, you try to find out the reality of even that relationship. And for instance, you have an argument with your girlfriend,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden you think, I don't know this girl. She's saying shit to me that it just isn't true, and she's not listening to what I'm
Hmm.
saying,
Hmm.
and there's no way I can penetrate or get through. And you think, what on earth is going on? Something
Hmm.
really, really bizarre is going on, because people will morph in and out of all different sorts of facets of personality, to shape shift, or to gaslight you, or to deny, or to whatever, all these different sorts of things. And so you can't even find truth in history in your own house,
Right.
because if you question yourself about what happened last week, oh, last week the cat got this mouse, and then your missus will go, no, that wasn't last week, that was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
What were your head? You got 3 weeks ago. Fuck, really? This is how it is. No, I don't believe in history. No.
Yeah, you see how, but that's why I asked you in the beginning if you believe Jesus once walked the planet and whatnot, or if it was just ideas. Because you see how
Look,
there's
the thing
actually
is
so
about the
many.
thing,
You see how
but
there's
I
so.
just want to make
Yeah, yeah, good, 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 good.
a little
Yep.
bit of interjection on that.
Hmm.
It is feasible. What I'm saying about that is feasible, because when you read the Book of Thomas, or when you listen to interpretations of the Book of Thomas has got 114 sayings that Jesus reputedly have said. If you listen to an interpretation of that, which is interpreted by intelligent people who are biblical scholars, so they know about Jesus, but they're not inventing anything in the sayings. They're just putting it into modern parlance, because 2,000 years ago people spoke differently, and particularly because Greek language or Hebrew, things are very different and interpreted different. But when you read that, then you can see that yes, Jesus very feasibly could have been a man who lived in India, and apparently worked, trained with the Gnostics, and became a Reiki healer and a meditator, and all these different sorts of things, powers that I know that human beings possess to this day. So I don't think there's any doubt that somebody 2,000 years ago, trained in a monastery for 20 years, would have vastly more powers than we've got. So I don't have a problem with that. Whether it actually was true,
Well, the reason I asked that is because you know how they say history can always be rewritten, right? We've got things like the
yeah,
Mandela effect for that reason and whatnot, where you think something happened one way, but it was actually another way, and it's kind of playing with our memory, right? But you see how there's many different versions of Jesus, how they talk about Jesus is really Lucifer, or let's say God is really the devil that you're rejecting and whatnot, or let's say Adolf Hitler was really the good guy. They gave you a story only because whoever wins the war is usually the one that gets to write the story about what happened in history.
yes,
So
you
let's
can't
say
believe
for
nothing.
no, that's why even like the people I hear, like when I'm talking about Billy Carson or any look, I take it with a grain of salt because to me they're all agents. You know what I'm saying? And the reason I feel
You-
like they're agents is because they'll give you the truth, but it's really like when you really dismantle it, there's certain things missing from it. And the way I look at it is that you could program somebody's present moment with what they believe about their past. That's why all the books I read, I don't take it wholeheartedly. I more or less like I'm able to read both sides. Why do you think in religion, Christianity, they tell you don't get into astrology, don't read about the devil, don't even say the word hell? Why? Why? Because if
And
you if
and
you believe in that
in
one
your life, there's
construct,
going to be so many false
right?
prophets that are going to be telling
That's
you
right.
that the book of is rubbish. Yeah, of course.
So
I
that's
mean,
why
it's just propaganda. It's just
when you listen to that one doctrine, it's going to shape your reality to become a sheep or a follower. But when you learn both sides but maintain that detached neutral state, you have more of a control as a sovereign being over yourself on this planet. You get what I'm saying? Because you're learning to basically look at it for what it is. It's not bad or good. They're both needed. They're both needed. In fact, look, there's a comic where Batman killed the Joker And in actuality, him killing the Joker, he started to miss the Joker. Could you believe that? It's because he needs the Joker. For him to exist, he needs the Joker.
Of
There's like a
course he
big,
does. Yeah,
deep meaning behind that. When you see
yeah.
Superman, Superman is really Jesus Christ. If you look at the comics and everything, the sun is behind him and he's like above the clouds, and then you got all the people with their hands reaching out to him and shit.
Superhero, classic
Right.
superhero.
And then when you look at, for example, his arch nemesis, his name is Darkseid. You get what I'm saying? And if you look at what Darkseid actually is, Darkseid is. There's a beautiful video that explains the whole story behind what that actual character even is. But there's a lot of gems and jewels in the things that they show us as far as superhero movies. But we take these things literal the same way we take things literal in the Bible. We look up to these characters when in actuality they came out of the imagination of man, which is basically you. It doesn't matter if you know another person created those the entities or whatnot. You still created them because that person that you're listening to, like Bill, I forgot what the creator of those comics are, but you created them, and they're there. Just like every history you hear, you have the ability to determine what happens next by what you believe, or determine about what you've heard about history that really doesn't even exist. It's like it's malleable, it's changeable. You can literally change the past. In fact, I could tell a lie so many times that I can believe it to be so, and it actually, you think it's real. Oh, that I told a lie so many times, I actually believe it's real right now, and it could be that it actually happened when it really didn't even happen. You get what I'm saying? So that's why I talk about history a lot. How what really happened in my past didn't really happen. They're just blueprints that I left for myself to basically map out what I'm gonna do in my reality. It's kind of like I left my footprints in the sand, so I know where I'm going just because I know where I've been. But where I've been is all those versions of the stories that I'm hearing. Is Jesus Lucifer? Is Jesus God? Is Jesus the devil? Who gives a fuck? I know all the versions, and what I do tomorrow, I can take whatever I want to pull into my reality now to determine where I'm going next. You get what I'm saying? There is no bad or good. But if I'm polarized to just that one belief, then the moment that I go forward, I'm only determining myself to that one path. And not everybody has a real strong focus, that frontal cortex, that gray matter, because they're fucking scattered all over the place. In actuality, you
Yeah.
shouldn't have any belief system. It's like you should be able to just eat, take a shit, process what you want, and that's it. If I eat, let's say, like bodybuilders will eat in the interest to gain muscle, but they'll eat specific foods to gain muscle, right? It's the same way. You want to eat or intake specific information and not hold the belief system around it. It's just to know where you're going forward or what's the intent behind you even doing that. It's like more of an authority figure. That's what my definition of God is. Is just you're taking authority. That word author, the author of your book, the conductor, how you conduct yourself in society, the conductor of the train. Because you're getting trained mentally everywhere, bro. You train in the gym, you train yourself mentally, you get trained at work, you get fucking trained in school. Your parents train you growing up, and you don't even know what the fuck you're training in. Oh, I'm a trainer, I'm training, but you don't even know what am I engaged in?
Well, yeah, the whole world is down to our individual subjective experience
Mm-hmm.
and what we want to believe, what we're conned into believing, what we're hypnotized into believing. There's a whole array of things that are going to be affecting what we're going to be writing upon our own motherboard.
Right.
Now, for instance, here's the thing. I read a lot about human psychology and all different sorts of personality disorders and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, because that way you can see the reality of all of these stories, like the Superman thing,
Yeah.
the Jesus thing, the Batman thing. They're all superheroes. We've had superheroes
Mm-hmm.
for forever. Carl Jung wrote about archetypes, the knight in shining
Yeah.
armor. You know, we love to create superheroes because they do all the things that we would fantasize about doing only if we could. Now, some of us have been better at being more of a hero than others in our time, and the hero's journey, of course, is a test of our metal to see who's got the metal. And if you've really got the metal and you're made of that stuff, then you will be your own hero, let alone anybody else's. You don't need fucking heroes on the silver screen if you're your own hero, you see. And so when I read about post-traumatic stress disorder and all those sort of things, I look at the symptoms of that and I go, look, I had something which was shocking to me, and it woke me up out of my somnambulism, and it's the catalyst for me being on the spiritual path and being awoken. This is when I was shot in Africa. Now, when you read about incidents like that, oh, you get flashbacks and you're terrified and you're afraid of going here and you're afraid of going there and you feel small and you blame yourself and you're guilty. Fucking hell. I'm like, who on earth would ever want to impose all of that stuff on you, having been fucking shot or suffered that trauma? What are you, a fucking masochist? I don't subscribe to any of it. I'm not afraid to travel the world. If someone comes at me with a gun, I'll do everything in my fucking power to stick it up his arse. You know, I'm not going to be running or trying to hide from anybody. I'm not afraid of going anywhere on the fucking planet. And I continue to travel, you know, go to all these places on my own in spite of that. So what I became out of all that was my own fucking hero. You know, I was the one that was shot in my bed by a fucking shotgun by an armed robber, for God's sake. And I still came out of that thinking that that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Why? Because I turned it all around. I polished that fucking diamond into something that's 1,000 facets now. And now, you know, I'm larger than life. And this is why, you know, lots of people, they can have a tendency to love to hate me because I'm fucking full of myself. And I've got every fucking right to be.
Yeah.
And so that's a classic example of creating a hero. I've created my own hero. And I'm very, very glad. What options did I have to create an asshole of myself, to create someone that's scared to leave my fucking room every day, to draw the curtains and to be, you know, shaking in my boots in case anything like that should ever happen again?
Yeah.
Good God. What sort of a man would bring that upon himself?
Yeah.
No, you do everything on the obverse.
Might hit pause and then hit